My name is Rick Verjee, and I'm the proud parent of a grad 21 student here at Claremont McKenna College. I also sit on the Parent Network Board, where I chair the Communications Committee. As much as I'd love to be conducting today's interview in person on the beautiful CMC campus, due to the global pandemic, I'm actually sitting in my office here in Vancouver, Canada, where I call home. This afternoon, I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing and welcoming Priya Junnar, Director of the Marian Miner Cook Athenaeum here at Claremont McKenna College. Welcome, Priya. It's so good to virtually be here with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you so much, parents and Rick, for inviting me to do this interview. I'm always excited to talk about the Athenaeum. So, and fondly known as the Ath, as everyone probably knows. So yes, I'm looking forward to this.
So Priya, let's pretend we're meeting for the first time, even though we're really not. Tell me a little bit about yourself and your background.
So my heritage is South Asian, and I actually was born in India, in a small town in northern India where my mom grew up. And it's it's sort of a cultural tradition in India, at least used to be, where you went back to the town that you grew up in as an expectant mom to deliver your first child. So this is exactly what she did with me. I'm the first child. And we lived in New Delhi till I was about 8 years old. And then we moved abroad for my dad's job. So we were briefly in Europe before we came to the Bay Area. I have a younger brother, just one sibling, a younger brother who, Rick, as you know, is your long lost identical twin. And it's, you know, and we have, so we lived in the Bay Area. I went to Cal, I studied econ, and then I went on to graduate school at Yale, which is where I met Hiram, who, as you know, is a CMC president. And we met while I was in my second year of graduate school and he was in the second year of Yale Law School. And here we are, almost 30 years of marriage later at CMC as president for Hiram and as Ath director for myself. Along the way, though, I got an MBA, I had 2 children, and I worked for the most part in marketing communications in higher ed institutions. So
wow,
that's a little bit about me.
Wow, that's quite the background. So that's interesting. You know, you mentioned quite a few things there. So as director of the Athenaeum, which is, I know, is a very busy role, a mom of 2 young adults, married to CMC's president, Hiram Chodosh, as you mentioned, are you actually able to achieve any sort of work-life balance?
Well, you know, that's tricky for all of us these days living in the modern world. I think we all struggle with that a bit. As far as the children, our kids are young post-college adults, and they're both working and living independently. So I don't have to do the soccer carpools anymore, if you will. Although I'll tell you a secret, I sort of miss that. So those were, you know, I mean, at the time it seemed like a pain, but now it's like, oh, that was kind of fun. Yeah. So the kids are not at home, but, you know, many of us who have young adult children or children who are in college are dealing with elder parent issues. And so that's something that was a bit of a challenge for a few years as we dealt with elderly parents. And it was demanding. And I think that, like in all situations and stages of your life, you have to have coping strategies that meet the demands of that stage of your life. And you have to lean on friends and family. I mean, I'm very lucky that Hiram is an incredibly supportive spouse. And so we are able to lean on each other for that kind of support. But in terms of just managing the work life, it is hard because he used to, I mean, when you talk about kind of a pre-pandemic world and the post-pandemic world, there is a lot of travel involved. There's a lot of events that are outside of the workday. The Ath, as you know, is an evening program. So oftentimes I found myself at the ath till 8:30 or 9 at night.
Right.
So there are, you have to find the space when you can to basically do self-care and read a book or go for a hike or cuddle with your dog. So
Well, good for you. I mean, the other thing, of course, is it doesn't hurt that, your commute is not a very long commute between home and work for both of you, I suppose, right? And
yes,
so
that's
that's helped. And another common term people have, often used to describe what you described just a few minutes ago was this thing called sandwich generation, which I think we're both in. In between elderly parents looking after them and kids, even though they're adults now, there's still lots involved, and it's still a busy time. So I totally can relate. Totally can relate.
yes.
Moving on to the Ath, Priya. The Ath, as I understand, has a very interesting history. And I'm looking forward to the 75th anniversary that's going to be launched this very soon, in fact, at CMC. But can you highlight some of that history for us today?
Yes, yes, absolutely. You're right. It has a distinguished and rich history. And of course, for much of it, we weren't at CMC, but I hear about it. It's a tradition that people love to talk about. So basically, the founding president, George Benson, and his wife started this sort of invite students over to your home for conversation type of a casual program. And they would have students come to their home, which was more or less at the site that the current Kravis building sits on. So for parents, they'll know that as the building that has admissions in the ground floor. So that's more or less where the house sat, and students would come over and have dinner with the Bensons. And I think that the Bensons would often have distinguished guests there to kind of talk to the students. So when the Starks became president and first lady, that I'm talking about, Jack and Jill Stark, they wanted to continue that tradition, but they upped it a bit because they didn't live in the house, because they had their own private home in Claremont, since they were already citizens of the college, if you will, private citizens of the college, and lived in their own home. So they were able to get more space out of the house, and I believe they did some renovations to the house as well, extended the dining room, added a library. So at that point, they could have up to, I think, 36, 40 students at a time in the dining area, and the program sort of expanded so that they started having the formal guests who would deliver lectures and interact with students. And the idea, I think, really was that you wanted students to be able to interact with people who were, who were sort of public intellectuals or experts in their field, and be able to have a conversation with them at dinner, hear them out, ask questions, kind of in an intimate setting. So when that Athenaeum in that old presidential home sort of started out, the program outgrew itself, and the Starks then began a campaign to build the current Athenaeum, which you'll see behind me in the virtual background. And so that campaign began in the late 70s, 1980. There was a famous Southern California architect who designed the building. There was a fundraising campaign, so the building was named, and the program was endowed. Some of the program was endowed. And we were off to the races in the current Athenaeum, which has, my understanding, it has gone through some configuration changes in terms of the dining room is now much bigger. It used to have a separation. So there's things like that internally, but for the most part, the history is as I described it. So.
Interesting. Well, from the several times I've been fortunate enough to spend some time in the Ath and tea and other things that I've attended. It's a remarkable facility, and I just feel that our students are so fortunate to have this facility right in their backyard for 4 years. That's interesting. So with respect to the speakers for the ad, how do you source the speakers? And many of them are very well known. So how do you go about sourcing these speakers typically?
Thank you. That's a very popular question, an important question for the Athenaeum. So I really rely on students, faculty, staff, alums, parents, and others to make suggestions. I mean, there are so many subjects out there that people are interested in, so many different perspectives on topics that I just, I don't think any one person can have like that 30,000 foot view of everything that people might be interested in. So I do rely on people, and I often get, I'll get emails from faculty, I'll get emails from parents making suggestions. And I also have a forum online it's called Suggest a Speaker Form, and it will prompt you to answer certain questions. So it might ask you, okay, who are you suggesting? What's your affiliation to CMC? Why should this person come to CMC? What would they talk about? What field would they be in? So there's everything from environment to economics, to political science, to the arts. So it essentially prompts the person suggesting to tell me why they think that speaker should come. So those are ways that ideas are generated. Sometimes someone will suggest someone who, wow, I'd love to bring them, but it's unlikely that they would come. For example, there was a number of years ago, someone suggested Beyonce. Now, I think she'd be a terrific speaker, but when I read why the student wanted Beyonce to come, it wasn't because Beyonce was an amazing artist, of course she is, but it was because for this student, her lyrics were powerful, and she spoke about feminism and about Black feminism, and it was very powerful. So that gave me an idea, and this is how it often works. I kind of thought, well, that's interesting. I can't get Beyonce. I'm not even going to try. But let me see what the student is interested in, something deeper than just Beyonce performing, at the Athenaeum. I don't know how we would even manage that. We couldn't. So then I started looking at, okay, like what about her lyrics? Who else is there anyone studying Beyonce's lyrics? And sure enough, it turns out there's a professor at Rutgers who teaches an entire course on Beyonce's lyrics, feminism, Black feminism. And so I reached out to him, and lo and behold, he came. And so he landed up playing all these clips of Beyonce, videos of Beyonce, but he was getting into the lyrics and the history of what Beyonce was saying. So that's all to tell you that it's not just a particular suggestion, but it often tells me the forum will help inform me about what it is about this person and this person's expertise or art form that the student is interested in, and it'll send me down other paths that help me build a program. So that's one example. Another example is I just look at what I have for the semester or the year, and I say, okay, what's missing in here? Like, what is something that would round out this semester? Is there a topic that's pressing right now that somehow hasn't bubbled up to the top? Or are we missing a writer or a poet or someone who can talk about, the environment or some science subject? So I try to also fill it out that way as well.
Very interesting. Other than, the Beyoncés of the world or somebody, super famous of that nature, as you get other recommendations from, various people, faculty, parents, perhaps, alumni, perhaps, is there a committee that you form to sort of decide which ones go forward and which ones not, or is that solely your decision?
The final decision always rests with the Athenaeum Director on whether to extend an invitation or not. I do have an Athenaeum Advisory Committee that's composed of the Athenaeum Fellows are always de facto members of that committee. And I have David Edwards, who's the long-time manager of the Athenaeum. He's been at the Ath over 30 plus years. And then there's faculty members. The chair of the committee is a faculty member always. So there's about 4 faculty members. And there are several other students in addition to the Ath Fellows who sit on that committee. There are a few that are there by virtue of the position that they have in the student government. And then there are a few that wanted to sign up for the committee because there is a call that goes out to students every spring around spring break that basically says, hey, here are all the committees that are at CMC. Are you interested in joining any one of them? So it's about 12 people who are on that committee.
Wow.
And we certainly do, we meet, normally we meet in the fall at least once and a couple of times in the spring. And we go over different themes, different types of speakers. So I will discuss that at a very high level with them. We don't necessarily get into every single speaker. I mean, with 4 nightly speakers a week during a normal school year, that would just be, it would just be too difficult to manage that if I needed to get some sort of a consensus on every single speaker. I mean, having said that though, there are often, every year, there are a couple of speakers that, you know, I just want to make sure that I sort of run them up the flagpole, if you will, just to make sure that I'm making a sound judgment about inviting them, or you know, or that because they might be a little bit pricier in terms of their honorarium than what is in my budget, that I have the support from other groups. And for that, of course, the other groups need to buy into it as well. So to that extent, other people are involved. Yes.
Okay, excellent. That's quite a process. Very interesting. Now, CMC's ATH, you know, is quite well known, I believe, within the higher ed sort of community. So how often do potential speakers reach out to you that say, look, I'm so-and-so, and I'd love to come and, you know, address your group at the CMC app? Is that a common thing that happens, or is it more you reaching out to them typically?
You know, it doesn't happen extremely frequently. I mean, certainly alums will reach out because they know, and others will reach out because they have a book that's coming out. Like, for example, publicists will reach out because they've had other people who've come to the ATH and they will say, hey, you know, David Sedaris has a new book. Would you consider having him? Or, you know, there are many examples like that. But when I do reach out to people, people will often say, oh, I've heard about the ATH, you know? So I think that it's maybe people don't know necessarily that they should be reaching out, you know? So I don't know on that end of things, on the speaker end of things, how speakers think about where they should be speaking. And perhaps it's one of those things where you want to be invited, you know? And so I'm not saying that everyone is. Someone will write to me, and actually someone wrote to me recently, and when I looked at his profile, I thought, wow, he would be really interesting to invite to the ATH, and I wouldn't necessarily have gone looking for him. So I am grateful when people do that, and I do a little bit of background work on it and decide what to do.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So you mentioned earlier that, you know, some of your leads come from parents, alumni, and, you know, virtually anybody in the CMC sort of community. But if a parent, for example, or an alum member wanted to, you know, come and present at the ATH, is there a minimum requirement or standard to meet for an ATH speaker per se that you have? I mean, what sort of guidelines would you have? How do you go through that selection process?
Yeah, Rick, thank you for that. So I think that, you know, we have a kind of a wide spectrum of people who come. I mean, we've had people who are, you know, Nobel laureates to people who are starting off in their careers or just had their first poetry book out, or maybe they've come up with a one-woman show and they've performed it and they have a message that they want to share. So there's no absolutely set criteria, because all of us are different and we all have different things to offer. My criteria in my mind, roughly, is, can the students learn something from this person? What has been the special experience of this person? Because not everyone we have is an academic or an award-winning scientist. There are people who just have had life experiences that are unique and moving and educational and inspiring. So I have tried not to box myself in to saying you must have this or you must be that, and it allows me some flexibility to be able to pick people who have done something that's special, that's educational for students, and that
Right.
students would want to hear about.
Right, right.
So,
That makes sense. When I was just preparing for this interview, I went onto the Ath website, on the CMC website, looked up the Ath, and this caught my attention. Marian Miner Cook Athenaeum, a distinctive feature of social and cultural life at CMC. So it's exactly what you just described, which is so accurate. Interesting. So Priya, how do you fund the speaker series at the Ath? Are the speakers paid? Is there what kind of an arrangement is there for all of that?
thank you. That is a question that comes up a lot. Some speakers we cannot pay. They might be public officials and they cannot take money. We can't even give them a pen, So of course we might pay for their flight, which we are permitted to do, or their ground transportation, but we don't have to pay them anything else. Other people, I always offer something, even if it's nominal, because I feel like it sort of locks them into coming. It's sort of like the dilemma of being a volunteer. When you're a volunteer for something, that is sometimes the thing that goes if things become too busy. So I don't want a speaker to ever fall through on me. And we've had very few people fall through on us, only because of sort of either major illness or some sort of weather delay. Other speakers are a bit more expensive. They might have an agent or they're just much better known. So what I do is I try to leverage my budget and kind of collaborate with others on campus. So I've got my little pot here. Rose Institute has a pot. Salvatore has a pot. The different other institutes have their pots, and we might collaborate together, either individually or sometimes 2 or 3 institutes in the Ath, to bring in a speaker that might be more expensive. So we sort of co-sponsor. So in the introduction that the Ath Fellow does, if you hear them say, Dr. Harlow's presentation is co-sponsored by the Rose Institute, that's what you're hearing, is that the Rose is putting in some funding for that. I also have, Hiram has a President's Leadership Fund, which I can tap into for speakers. And then of course, Res Publica, which is an advancement pot, if you will, advancement will support Res Publica level speakers. So I can grow my pot to be much bigger than what it is by collaborating with people around the campus. But I have learned that it is good to offer something to everyone. And some people really are not expecting it. A lot of academics are like, wow, thanks, this is great.
Yeah.
So I think it's really nice. And I think they would have put in the effort anyways, but it just locks them in a way.
Now we're getting into sort of the day-to-day. You mentioned,
Sure.
typically four, sometimes more, I understand, during the week events. Some of them are lunches and so on. So I'm sure there's high demand in many of these talks, but you have limited capacity. So how do you manage all of that?
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for, that's kind of an operational question, but it's a really important one. And we live it every day at the Athenaeum. So our capacity, so we have a capacity issue in the main dining room, Eggert dining room, and we can seat about 135 people for dinner. So the way it works, basically everyone on the CMC campus is able to attend any and all talks. If you came every day for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, well, we don't do breakfast, but lunch and dinner, you are invited, assuming spaces are available. And all of these are free, obviously, as you know, to students, faculty, and staff. And essentially it's a process whereby an email goes out every week. Students, I try to get the entire semester schedule up at the beginning of the semester so students can take a look and say, oh, I want to go to this, I want to go to that, and kind of bookmark it, if you will, on their schedule. And then every week events open up for the following 2 weeks. Basically 2 weeks worth of events are open, and students, faculty, staff sign up for those events online. And the reason you sign up is we need to know how many people are coming for dinner. the kitchen staff. I have 6 people in the kitchen, including Chef David Skinner, who's been with us almost 25 plus years, 28 years. And he's got a series of sous chefs and a pastry chef. So we need to know, okay, how much food are we ordering for this event? So that's one of the reasons we have the sign up situation. But if a talk is sold out, or say you weren't able to go to the dinner because you have a lab that goes till 6:15, you just want to be done with the lab and quickly come to the ath to hear the speaker beginning at 6:45, you can do that. You can sit in the back. So we have open seating in the back, and oftentimes a whole bunch of people will come in, around 6:30, about 10-15 minutes before the talk is about to begin. So, and also parents and alums are always welcome as well. If you're visiting your child, you might want to say to them, hey, I want to go have an after dinner tonight. Let's go see who's speaking, So really we are extremely open-minded about who can come, as long as the capacity is not, it's not full. And of course, priority always goes to students. So
right.
that is, the most important thing. As long as it's not, students are not still wanting to fill those chairs, we're willing to have others.
Right. So if capacity allows, what about students at the other 5 Cs, for example, or other community members within Claremont, for example? Is that open?
Yes, another excellent question, Rick. So the other actually the 7 Cs are invited to come if there is space after it's opened to CMC. So we have, our website has a formula basically that it's sort of running in the background, and it knows that if there's a certain number of seats left about 5 days before the event is about to happen, then it just opens up to everyone else at the 5 Cs to sign up. And even for them, for the colleges, it's also free, so that you can, if you're a Pomona student, you can come, or Scripps or whatever, including Pomona faculty, Scripps faculty, what have you. So it is, I think, an incredibly generous program. And for me, I feel like if I have a great speaker in the room and I have 10 seats that are open, the speaker's here. Like, why wouldn't I want someone from Pomona or Scripps or Pitzer to be able to hear the person out, as long as my students who wanted to sign up have been able to do so.
Right. That's outstanding. That is incredibly generous. I would agree. And what an amazing feature for the whole Claremont community, actually. Now, is there a dress code in effect, or do students come, straight from class or whatever? How does that work?
Yes. So yes, there is a dress. There are guidelines. There are attire guidelines, and it used to be that in the past it was very formal, and young men had to wear a suit and tie, and I think young women also had to be sort of business attire dressed. Now we have loosened those, if you will, to the extent that you can wear business casual. So if you're a young man, you can wear khakis and a golf shirt, or some sort of a collared shirt. No, but you don't have to wear a tie, or you don't have to have like a 2-piece suit on. And the idea really is that I think that business attire has kind of changed, has evolved a little bit.
Yes.
And so as long as people have taken the care to get out of their pajamas or shorts or sweatshirts and sweatpants and slippers, as long as they've taken the care that the speaker has taken in coming to speak to them. I mean, that's sort of the standard. And this is for the evening speakers. At lunchtime, we understand that students might sign up for a speaker event, but they're in between classes. They have a class that ends at lunch. They're going to come hear the speaker and then go to another class. I don't want them having to run to their dorm and get, to be changing. So at lunchtime, we have a very relaxed, attire policy. But in the evening, it's like, okay, this person has taken time to maybe fly across the country, to leave, you know, her spouse behind or leave her kids, and then is going to fly back the next day. And so we need to take the time to be at least dressed in a way that shows that we've taken time
Yeah.
to come to this event. And so to that extent, we have, you know, we do require a certain type of attire. You've got to have shoes on,
Yeah.
you know, and that's actually more of sort of a health code regulation
Right.
too, because we serve food, so you can't be at the Athenaeum without shoes on,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah. That sounds reasonable, fair. And I would also add that, from time to time, when the kids are there for 8 months or whatever it is in a year, it's nice to be able to dress up once in a while if they want to. And it gives them an opportunity, a legitimate opportunity to do so. Every week if they want it.
Right.
So.
And if I may add, I mean, for students who perhaps came to CMC without any formal attire or semi-formal attire or business casual attire, because maybe they were first years and they thought, well, I'm not really going to need semi-formal attire, or perhaps I don't, this is a strain on my family resources, and I don't really have the funds to maybe buy something that's semi-formal or formal. We have, thanks to the Crafts Opportunity Fund, we have, our Dean of Students office works really hard to make sure that you have whatever you might need for that first kind of corporate event that, for example, a recruiter who comes to campus and is doing a corporate event, and you might have a student who's maybe come to campus without the right attire, not thinking that they would need it, that they can then go out and purchase it and be either at the corporate recruiting event or come to the ath if needed. So we've tried to eliminate any barriers to people feeling like I can't go to the ath because I didn't bring anything, even business casual, with me.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. That's fantastic. Okay, let's move on to a question that sort of talks more about the students' role. So I understand students play quite an active role at the ath, over and above attending the talks. So can you elaborate on the various roles students typically play in a normal year, not this year, obviously, but in a normal year when they're on campus?
Yes, I'm absolutely happy to do that. So of course I have the most visible of the students at the ath are the Athenaeum Fellows. And so these are typically 2, sometimes 3. This year we have 3. Last year we also had 3 ath fellows. These are the students who host the speaker during the reception, who host the speaker at the head table, and who introduce the speaker and facilitate the Q&A. So they have highly visible roles at the Athenaeum. There are students who I can tell are going to be interested in being the ath fellow from the get-go, because these are people who from the beginning are coming to the ath a lot, who are asking lots of questions, who are often trying to sit at the head table, who just have, you can tell they just have this affinity. A lot of students have the affinity for the ath, but then there's this group that we call athaholics who are just coming all the time. And it's really like their extra class. And many of them then apply to be ath fellows. So that's sort of your most visible role. Next, also highly visible are all the student servers that we have. I mean, if we're doing a big lunch program of say 80 people, and then at capacity dinner program of 135 people, that's roughly 200 plus people that the kitchen is churning out meals for. And there's obviously setting tables and clearing tables, and then the very famous tea, coffee, hot cocoa thing that we do during the sit down meals. So we need to hire students. And so we, in a typical year, will have about 100 students who are employees of the Athenaeum as servers. And they're not just servers, they're hosts who are checking people in. When you come to an ath event, you're being checked in by a host. There's the wine table, which is usually a student who's serving wine, a student who's over 21 typically, and who's carding any other student that they're not sure about the age. Then we have a whole bunch of people who are helping the chef and the pastry chef and the sous chefs. working in the kitchen. I mean, actually, literally working in the kitchen. And several successful culinary careers have been launched by students who found their true passion
Wow.
by working in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So we have that group of students, and then we have, you know, everything in between, from setting up the table to bringing out the tea. So it's a very important. It's we really rely on our students to be able to run the ath in the way that we have it. And for the student servers, for the evening student servers, and actually also at lunch, they'll often, once the speaker starts speaking, the idea is that we shouldn't be hearing cutlery and people coming in and out. Like, essentially, this is why we have 45 minutes of eating time, is that you're eating and you're having conversation with the speaker if you're at the head table, with your peers or with your faculty peers, faculty if you're sitting at one of the other tables. And that once the speaker starts speaking, you are focused on that speaker. You're not trying to cut your steak at the same time.
Yeah.
And so for the student servers, what they'll do is, when it's getting close to 6:45, they'll get their own meal in the back, and they'll sit on one of the sofas or sit in one of the empty chairs way in the back, and you know, watch as well.
Right.
So
Right. What a
it's a
terrific
nice perk.
experience for you know, 100 or more kids every semester. I mean, I can attest to the several lunches that I've been at the app, to be at the app, typically during parent and family weekend in February.
Right.
The students do really a remarkable job. So I'm not sure if there's training involved. There probably is some level of training, but they're fantastic. So kudos to you and your team and the whole chef team that handles all these students. Amazing opportunity. At the end of an event, how do you measure the success of an ath event? So for example, is there a post-event survey that gets sent out to attendees to garner feedback, and if so, you know, is that feedback shared with the speakers? How do you measure what's working, and if it's not working, you can adjust course as you move forward?
Right. Yes, thank you. So I can always, you know, I try to go to as many ath events as I possibly can. There's, you know, sometimes there's other demands on my time, especially with other CMC events that I need to be at. But for the most part, I'm at, I would say 90% of it, 95% of ath events. And you just know when a speaker is really successful, because there's this energy, there's a palpable energy in the room with a great speaker or a very interesting topic. And also, as soon as the speaker is done and the ath fellows open up the Q&A, you have all these hands going up. So you know that that's, you know, lining up the questions basically. So you know that that's been a really successful event. I don't even need to really ask anyone or try to do a survey, right? But, and also I think that students, because they're used to seeing me there a lot, they will on their way in or out, they'll say, oh, that the other night, that was a terrific talk. I loved that. Could I follow up with that speaker? Would you be willing to share email or what have you? Or they're also very honest. I mean, CMC students are very honest. They'll tell you how they see it, and they'll say, yeah, it wasn't quite what I expected. I thought she was going to talk about this, but instead talked about this, or, you know, that was a low energy talk. So they're very honest. So I feel like it's a mini survey kind of on a daily basis with the students, just anecdotally. And if, you know, there's been a couple of times where I've had, especially through agents, a speaker that's come in through an agent, and where I have been, for the most part, I'm always blown away. But you know, there have been a couple of times where the person essentially didn't deliver quite what we thought they were going to deliver, and I will tell that to the agent. But I know it from the students already. They'll say that wasn't quite what we thought, you know.
Yes,
so.
yes. You know what? I mean, it reminds me of, you know, when I was involved in a more of an operating business, I would be more hands-on. I would be present as you are, and you just have you know, a feel of the pulse of what's going on, and that's, I think, what you just described. So I can totally relate to that. That's excellent. Now, the act from my perspective, is quite unique from what I understand. So from your perspective, what makes the ath unique at CMC?
So the ath is absolutely singular. I mean, there is nothing like that in American higher ed. And I think that while every college has a speaker series, I don't think there's any college who hasn't had a special speaker. Those speakers will tend to be in an auditorium. They'll have had dinner or lunch or some special program with a group of trustees and the president, and then they basically walk onto the stage and they deliver this lecture with the lights on them, and then they take a couple questions and they're gone. We have the complete flip side of that. We have, at an ath event, no trustee or president, I don't care who you are, if you're not a CMC student, you cannot sit at that head table. And so it is incredibly student-centric. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but students get priority in the Q&A. So if during the Q&A, if an ath fellow sees a bunch of hands up, the ath fellow is going to go to the students first. And only when there's a little bit of a chance to have someone else ask a question will they go to someone who's not a student. So that's another special thing. The other thing is that we do this 4 nights a week, and we're often doing it at lunch, and we are doing it in the smaller rooms that the ath has. So there's no one out there who does this 4 nights a week where they're serving a sit-down dinner of, a really high-end sit-down dinner, and where students are getting to interact with the speaker. Speakers will tell me this all the time afterwards. They'll say, wow, that was amazing. Like, the questions were great. I loved sitting at the table with students only. I wasn't thinking that was going to happen, even though I do tell everyone this. I think everyone gets too many emails. So they sort of realize when they get there, wow, I'm only sitting with students. And they're just blown away by the quality of the interaction with students at the table and with the quality of questions that they get during the Q&A. So I would say the ath is unique in multiple ways, but mainly it's unique because it's so student-centered.
Fantastic. Now, the building itself, it's a beautiful building, as we've talked about already. But in addition to the main dining room, you mentioned briefly, there's some other smaller rooms where they can hold smaller events and so on. What else happens in that building typically within a year? What else goes on, sort of non-ath talk related types of things, if anything?
Yes, indeed. The ath has multiple rooms in the building. Yeah. Most of us are familiar with the big room, but there are several smaller rooms, including 2 small dining rooms. We often have smaller ath talks in the dining rooms with speakers, but we make these rooms available to student groups and clubs for their semester meetings. So, and they don't have to have a reason to want to have a meeting / dinner / any kind of meal in that room. They just need to be a student club. So for example, your daughter is involved with the Under the Lights theater group. And so they can avail themselves of one of those rooms once a semester. Maybe they want to have a planning meeting. Like, what are we gonna highlight next year? So they write to us. We make dinner for them. Sometimes students group will request a certain type of meal. They'll say, can you please tell Chef Skinner that we love his salmon? So they'll request things. And so the group can have kind of an organizing meeting and have a free meal where they're in this small intimate room together planning things out. Or they can have a meeting where they're celebrating maybe the end of the production the following semester. So any student group can do that. And then faculty can use those rooms because it allows them to have a student meal for their classes. So every faculty member has the opportunity to invite their class to a meal, and the ath, it's free for them and for everyone else at the ath. And so a faculty member may say, I've got my class of 12 and we want to have a meal at the ath to celebrate the end of the semester or to talk about thesis or what have you. And so faculty will use that as well with their classes, and clubs will use that as well. And of course we also offer the opportunity for tea now, for classes to have tea together or clubs to have tea together. So we give them a private room in the afternoon where we make cookies and, offer tea and coffee and stuff. So yes.
Well, I can attest to the desserts and the food in general at the Ath as being outstanding, including the treats that come out during the afternoon tea. Yes. But you just revealed something that I had no idea. So typically when Chanel comes home, for the first, couple of weeks or so, she's telling her mom, hey mom, can we have this for dinner? Or can you make this for dinner? Or can we have this for dinner? And it's stuff that we haven't typically had. And now I know where she's getting it from, because she can come to the app and just sort of order what she wants.
Right.
Now
right,
I know
exactly.
where she gets that from. Okay.
Exactly.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay,
But
well, thank you so much for sharing that. And just as we come towards the end of our time today, from your perspective, what does the future of the app look like? As we move forward, certainly from this year, getting back into a sort of normal year and beyond.
So I think that the future of the app, I'm going to talk about it sort of within the confines of the speaker program for a few minutes. Like I want to see more sort of diversification in the format, if you will, and that is something that we have been doing. So we want to, traditionally the speaker would deliver a keynote kind of thing, and there'd be a Q&A. But we've had a lot of success with sort of interactive programming where a speaker actually does an interview with, for example, the Ath Fellows, or with the podcast team, which, our podcast team does an amazing job interviewing people who come to the Athenaeum. And those formats have been super successful. So I think we're going to try to do a little bit more of that. We've also tweaked things at the actual dining tables. So for example, the Ath Fellows last year had come up with this feature of picking a question that they thought was relevant to what the talk was going to be. And we would print out those questions on little index cards and put them at the table. Not that anyone needs coaching talking, at the dinner table, but something to help ground them in the talk that was coming up.
Right.
So the question is on an index card and it's sitting at the table, and then you might say, okay, well, let's talk about this, and everyone goes around, and maybe it develops into a question that they can then ask the speaker after the talk is completed. Yeah. So we're working on these little sort of changes around the margins of sort of enhancing some of the experiences that people might have, with their peers at dinner, or you change the format a little bit of the interaction with the speaker themselves. But I do think that it's such a popular format of having your reception and having your buffet and having your sit down dinner and having the head table, that I don't anticipate huge monumental changes, because it is a winning formula. It's been a winning formula, since we moved into that building, which was 1983, and probably even before when it was in the other building. So I don't see big changes happening. And I think the alums, including your daughter, when she becomes one, will just have there'll be a revolution if we change too much.
Change it too much. Yeah. No, that's, if it's not broken, let's not fix it, right?
Another sort of addition to the Ath came about serendipitously, actually, a few years ago. I did have one late minute cancellation, and it was, I think, an illness or something. But in any case, I was trying to figure out what I would do with that evening. And I came up with this idea of having senior thesis night. Oh. And it was in April. It was later in April of that year. And I reached out to a handful of students who I knew well, who were at the Ath a lot. Towards the end of senior year, when seniors are really like immersed in their theses, I often will hear what they're writing about. They'll come to the Ath and they're like, I had to have dinner anyways. I need a break from my thesis. I need to clear my head. So I had a sense of what some of the students were working on, and I basically invited them to do a senior thesis night. And I lined up about, I forget, it was 6 or 7 students, and I gave them some guidelines. It's not so much about all the things that you discovered in your thesis, but what was your process? How did you come about it? What is some advice that you have for for the rising seniors, etc. And so through those years, through that first senior thesis, I've sort of refined it every year a little bit. And of course, we didn't do it last year, and don't have anything planned for this year either, because I think everyone is so busy and so burnt out with online stuff. But one of the things that it evolved into is an invitation to the parents of the students.
Mhm.
And so in the last year that I did this, I had families that flew in from New York, from Seattle, who drove in from LA, who came from other parts of the area and the country to sit at the table with their student who was presenting. And the idea is the student gets to invite their advisor and their family and anyone else. And then I extend special invitations to that group, like literally from me saying, so and so is presenting at the Ath, would like for you to be at their head table. So the students have their head table. We do a group picture, and it's become a really popular kind of event. And I don't reach out to any faculty. It's not about the student who's winning the award or
Right.
is going to have the best thesis or the highest GPA. It's about a diversification of topics, so that I kind of have something from roughly every major, or generally, roughly all the different things that students study.
Yeah.
But also something that I just think is cool and fun, so
I think that's brilliant. I think that's such a great experience, for the seniors who are presenting their thesis. And I remember attending a couple of those, but this was at family weekend, I think, when Chanel was a junior, and she really wanted to attend that and hear from seniors that she knew that were presenting, because she was thinking about what she was going to do for a thesis the following year. So I think that's a great idea, not only for the seniors presenting, but also for the rising seniors, as they are sort of in that process of figuring out exactly what they want to do their thesis on. So what a great idea. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, and you realize what amazing work these students are doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just blown away by the sophistication and the creativity of some of these theses.
And the
So
diversity of the topics.
yeah.
Which is everything from, I mean, it's just so diverse, what they decide to do their thesis on, which is fantastic.
Yes.
But, one of the things that the pandemic has highlighted, and I think perhaps maybe in one of the silver linings, is this whole way of being able to share, for example, Ath events using the technology, and opening it up not only to the Claremont community, as you described earlier, but literally opening it up to the Claremont community globally. I'm a perfect example. I'm sitting in Vancouver, and I've attended numerous Ath events this past year where I wasn't able to do so before. So is that something that's likely going to continue as an example?
I do think that at least in the short run, it will continue. I think that, we've all gotten, because we've all gotten used to a virtual interactions. And I think that speakers who come will be much more open to that. And I think what I imagine is that I want the Ath for students who are on campus. I want them to come to the Ath. I want them to physically come to the Ath, because I think that is such a fundamental point of the Ath, is to be together, to break bread together, to share a story. How was your day? And then to listen to a speaker and to stand up and say, thank you so much for coming. I'm Chanel, I'm a senior here. And she does ask great questions, by the way. My question to you is X. So I don't want that to fundamentally change.
Right.
But I appreciate that alums and parents love listening in. In fact, that's one of the things that I hear the most when I see parents for Parents Weekend or what have you. People will say to me, "Oh my God, I wish I could come to the ATH. I would come to the ATH every day." And so I think that in the short term, we are going to try to live stream
Mhm.
as many of the ATH talks as the speaker gives us permission to do. And
Right.
I think we're going to try to contract that in at least while people are open to it, still open
Yeah.
to it. And I think that
Right.
in the short run, they will be.
Yeah.
And we will send out invitations. If
Yeah.
you want to watch, please, log in at this hour and watch.
Fantastic.
So,
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. It makes a lot of sense, but you make a very valid point that you don't want to lose the essence of the in-person culture and camaraderie that the students have, and being able to ask questions in live, in person, and so on. I think that's critical. So that's a very valid point. Priya, any parting thoughts or comments today? It's been fantastic. Thank you so much. This has been so wonderful to get your insight and your feedback and just your wisdom on everything to do with the app. But any parting thoughts or comments?
well, I would say that I think everyone has really missed the ATH this year. I mean, in the real physical sense of the word, even though of course it's expanded, it's been able to expand itself into parent and alumni groups. So I would say that when parents, you are back on campus with your child, and when they return to campus, please stop by the ATH. Please stop by and say hi. I love meeting people. If for some reason we don't cross paths with the ATH, then I would love to see you guys at Parents Weekend. Harm and I always have a big reception at the house. It is very packed, but we love having all the people. And I look forward to meeting everyone. I feel like I've missed out on a good year and a half of parent interaction. So I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone, not just at the ATH, but also just back on campus and at our home next February, and maybe well before then, certainly at the Athenaeum when you bring your students back. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time and consideration today.
It's been a pleasure. That brings us to the conclusion of our interview today. Sincerely, on behalf of the CMC Parent Network Board and the entire parent and alumni community, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your history, and the passion that you have for the ATH. And especially thank you, Priya, for all that you do every day for our students at CMC. Thank you so much. Even after being a relatively engaged parent for the past 4 years, I got to say that I've certainly learned a few new things today that I wasn't aware of. So I really appreciate and thank you for sharing those thoughts with us. I'm sure, Priya, you cannot wait, as you just said, to welcome students, faculty, and guests back to the ATH in person, hopefully by this fall at the latest. Thank you so much.
Thank you.